Hey, do you like facts?
I prefer stories.
Okay, I'll tell you a short one. It's the story of human society dropping 400 kilos of plastics into the ocean every second.
Yes, I heard this scary number. Was it from our EU First Vice President at the Ocean Conference in Malta?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Should we double check his calculation, by the way?
I don't think it's necessary.
Let me get the calculator. How many seconds in a year?
Come on.
Help me out.
Fine, okay. I would say maybe 31,536,000.
Seconds in a year. Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, so he's on 12 million tons a year, which is a bit above what we found out. But yeah, let's say everyone seems to agree it's more than 8 million tons of plastic a year that end up into the ocean.
Who cares about the exact number? I mean, it's millions of tons. It's way too much. Let's just fix it.
Right. Welcome to our Ocean series, a 15-episode investigation where we tell the truth.
That's your tagline?
A 15-episode investigation where we tell the truth and talk to interesting people.
Wow. I think our listeners are really impressed by now. Why don't you tell us what's on the menu for today?
In the previous episode, we got to the conclusion that the best thing we can do to solve plastic pollution is working upstream, making sure no plastic enters the ocean in the first place.
Never, ever again.
So for the rest of the series, I'm taking you upstream.
Okay.
Starting now. On the menu for the upcoming episodes, we'll look at a map and point fingers. Then we'll realize we're pointing fingers in the wrong direction. We'll follow plastic upstream, all the way up to your kitchen.
What? My kitchen?
We explain why recycling markets will have a big problem starting January 1st, 2018.
China has notified the World Trade Organization that it will ban the import of 24 different types of garbage.
Which means we will have a big problem as well. We discuss how the EU Commission is integrating or not this big problem into the upcoming plastic strategy. But before that, I will tell you a story we're the first ones to break.
This is the first sort of public interview, and I figured podcast within the industry, it's a little different than sort of New York Times or something.
Oh, that's the story of the recycler who hides GPS tracking devices in his plastic bales, isn't it?
Yes, we should call it a guide, actually. How to find the final destination of your plastic bale if you're on a tight budget.
I love it.
We'll make a few episodes out of all this.
Let's get started. I can't wait.
Where does ocean plastic come from?
Back in my day, nobody questioned things.
So, millions of tons of plastic enter the ocean every year. I'm sure you will agree that the first logical thing to do is look at where this is happening.
What countries let the plastic fall into the ocean, you mean?
Yes, and how exactly? Rivers, shore, how the hell did we get to such big numbers?
Yeah, it's not like a small leak in the system. Good place to start.
Well, actually, you know what? Let's get to the point. No need to drag it out. It seems that 80% of ocean pollution comes from land activity.
And the rest comes from maritime activity.
Yeah, and we'll get back to this later on in the series. But looking at land, China, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam and Thailand are the countries where most plastic enters the ocean, accounting for more than 60% of the total just from those countries.
Wow.
Now, the stats usually don't include what's coming from rivers, and there's some discussion at the moment about how to account for rivers, and we'll get back to this as well.
Okay, so the problem mainly comes from Southeast Asia?
Right. That's what people tend to think. Ocean plastic, it's because of the Chinese. At home, I do separate my plastic waste and then it gets recycled.
Okay, are you saying my plastic doesn't get recycled?
Less than 6% of your plastic gets recycled, Eileen.
What? Less than 6%? What happens with the rest of it?
Let's take it step by step so we don't lose anyone. and this way we can also be precise and accurate.
Man, I can't believe it.
Let's break it down. What we can say for sure is that in Europe, roughly 45% of our plastic is exported to Asia. This is public data, links in the episode notes. The US also exports massive quantities of plastics to Asia, and we'll get back to that.
So, if most of the ocean plastic comes from China, Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand and Vietnam, and we export millions of tons to those countries, then chances are our plastic ends up in the ocean too?
Yeah, chances are, as you're saying. Actually, it's more than chances are. China, for instance, imports at least 55 to 60% of the rest of the world's plastic. It's not like if there was a sign on Chinese beaches and rivers saying, Asian plastic only, because European plastic gets recycled according to human rights and planetary boundaries.
No, I get you. From the point plastic enters those markets in the first place, it's difficult to track.
Difficult, but not impossible.
I see you coming.
Yes?
Wait, before we look at the final destinations, could you explain how things work for post-consumer plastic, just for anyone who doesn't know what it's about?
Yeah, sure.
Let's say, all I know is I buy products at the supermarket with all their beautiful packaging, and now it's at my home.
Well, all this single-use plastic probably ends up in the bin shortly after.
It does?
Okay, so let's take the scenario where your city placed a separate bin for plastic or a bin for all recyclables. Then you sort your plastic and throw it in there, right?
Right.
You did the job. You're a good citizen, Aline. And regardless of what happens after and what I'm going to tell you, you should keep being a good citizen. It really matters, even if only 6% gets recycled. Tomorrow it may be 7, then 8, etc., right?
Yeah?
So your plastic packaging is in the bin, useless.
Useless.
It is at this very moment that the real adventure starts. It starts there, in the street container, with all of the other unhappy plastic packaging items.
Unhappy?
Yes, because they've been used for a few seconds only, and we already call them waste. So they get picked up by a truck, and this is where they meet a lot of other unhappy friends. Unhappy because they too
have been used a few minutes only. Okay, keep it moving.
Okay, they all travel together for a few kilometers to a sorting station, or what we call a MRF. MRF, a municipal recycling facility.
That's where all the trucks go.
Yes, trucks enter the yard, get on a huge scale so the station can track how much material is coming in, and then they go drop all the materials in a pile. From there, the materials get sorted into different fractions, sometimes using automated systems, sometimes with human workers that separate by hand the different materials from conveyor belts.
Okay.
From there, plastics are regrouped by types. Typically, they are compressed and tied into plastic bales to optimize the handling. You can just imagine big cubes of compressed plastic of various qualities. And from there, each type of plastic is going to take a different road.
So where do they go next?
Well, it depends on a number of parameters, like where is the sorting station located, the shape of the regional markets for materials, disposal options, etc. But to make it simple, the plastics that are easily recyclables in Europe will go to a European recycler if it makes economic sense to recycle them. And that's often the case for the PET, for instance, which is the plastic type 1.
Plastic type 1? What do you mean by that?
If you look under a plastic bottle, for instance, there's a small triangle printed on the plastic with a number inside it. Number 1 means it's PET, polyethylene terephthalate, I think I would say.
So that's easily recyclable.
Let's say it's what has most value on European recycling markets today. Typically water bottles, for instance, which, by the way, do not get recycled into other bottles. But that's another story.
Okay, so type 1 is the most valuable. What happens to the other types of plastic?
Well, there are the ones we don't really know how to recycle, like all the multi-layer packaging, for instance, where plastic is mixed with layers of other materials.
Right, yeah, I hate those.
Well, now you hate them even more because they cannot really be recycled, and the sorting station is either going to send it to a landfill, to an incinerator, not to say a cement kiln, or ship them to Asia.
So the plastic that's not recyclable goes to Asia.
Yeah, we're generalizing a little bit here, but let's say it has no value whatsoever, so you're going to pay someone to get rid of it.
Difficult.
If your local landfill is cheaper than sending it to China, then you will landfill it. If a cement kiln is offering to burn it for fuel, that is what you will do. The thing about shipping into Asia is that it's extremely cheap. Ships come from China to deliver goods in Europe or to the US, and instead of going back to China empty, they fill the containers with plastic scraps and make a business out of it. See what I mean?
Some people would call this carbon emission reductions.
Right. Then there's also the plastic that we could technically recycle in Europe if it made economic sense.
But it doesn't.
So they are getting the same treatment as the ones that are not recyclable. This is how your friend the plastic packaging ends up in places where you don't really want to send it in the first place. A Chinese dump, a landfill, an incinerator, the ocean, a dirty beach somewhere.
I don't know what to say. Is there a positive side to this story?
No. Basically, the conclusion is that European plastic scraps enter a commodity market. So typically, sorting stations and recyclers are in touch with brokers who will coordinate the shipping of those plastic scraps all around the world.
Okay, so basically if I run a municipal recycling facility, I'm looking for what is the best value I can get for my plastic bales, right?
Well, I don't know what happened.
Right.
And there are brokers specializing in finding destinations for those materials.
Right.
So the brokers should know where it's going, no?
Well, sort of. They can give you a destination port and you don't know what's happening next.
Damn.
And this is where Martin comes in.
Martin? Oh, right, the man behind the GPS tracker story.
Yes. Coming next, a recycler puts a GPS tracking device to find the final destination of the plastic bales he's exporting every week.
Okay, keep it moving.
That's Martin.
Well, I hope it was good for you.
So just to recap before we switch to spy mode. We started from the countries that are dropping most plastic into the ocean. We looked at the contribution of European plastics to their recycling markets. We now understand the basics of recycling markets in Europe. We are able to track the containers back to the first destination ports. I think that's not too bad for a start.
Yes, and we were stuck at the destination port.
Until I heard from that man.
My name is Martin Bourque. I'm the executive director at the Ecology Center in Berkeley, California.
He found a way to track some of his shipments all the way to their final destination.
But not impossible.
And in Berkeley, they've been recycling since 1973.
Wow.
Martin and his team are deep into the recycling mindset. He operates an organization called Ecology Center, which, among other things, collect the recyclables in Berkeley. I actually think I met Martin and visited the station back in 2013, I would say. Yeah, when I was starting to get interested in materials.
You're an old man.
Right. Anyway, I want to thank him because he is not public about the story and he accepted to talk to us and let us publish it.
This is the first sort of public interview, and I figured podcast within the industry, it's a little different than sort of New York Times or something.
Yes, but New York Times is listening and they're going to chase him now.
It's an exciting story.
Let's get to it.
Hi there.
Hey Martin, how are you?
I'm good. How's it going?
Yeah, so first I asked him why he wanted to track his plastic bales. Why was he suspicious about their destination?
In 2013, we started collecting mixed recyclable plastic, and I say recyclable in quotes. at that time, we had pretty clear line of sight to a facility in China where our broker out of the Port of Oakland was sending the materials. And we had actually worked with partners in China, the Wuhu Ecology Center. And those folks had gone over and inspected this facility in China and found pretty good labor standards and pretty decent environmental controls on the plastics recycling facility, and that they were actually making export-grade pellet and flake.
But market crashed a couple of years ago. You may remember that.
Yeah, I was still young, but I remember. And?
We found out that our materials were no longer going to that facility at King Fong, and that raised a lot of concerns to us. We had recently encountered the filmmaker of Plastic China and seen some pretty horrific footage of the informal sector in China.
Plastic China, the film to watch if you're interested in those questions.
We'll link in the episode notes.
Where materials are being sorted by hand in backyards in pretty horrific conditions. They would pull out whatever they thought was valuable, and then the rest of it would just get dumped on the side of the road or pushed into a canyon. And so we were very concerned as an environmental organization that pioneered recycling and was the first curbside recycler in the U.S. We were very concerned that things that we were telling our residents were being recycled might actually be contributing to problems of ocean pollution and problems with air and water quality, as well as some horrific labor standards.
Imagine a world where everyone in waste management cared the way Martin cares. I mean, about where materials go.
Yeah, it takes courage to face the truth. But not everyone is courageous.
This is the least we can say.
So, they knew and controlled where their plastic was going. Market crashes, big mess. They don't know anymore.
Correct.
So when we found that out, we started thinking, well, how can we find out where our stuff is going? Because basically, the way it works is, we collect the stuff at the curb. It goes through our sorting and processing facility, and it gets baled up into these big bales that get put into shipping containers. And then those shipping containers are sold as sort of units, and they get brokered by a brokerage firm here in California, and then they get sold now to a broker in some other port in Asia. And, historically that had been Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong they'd be shipped to the mainland in China. But we couldn't tell where it was going. We had no way of tracking. Once it left our brokerage line of sight, there was no chain of custody that made it possible for us to see where it actually ended up.
Same problem that everyone has. You don't know what's going on beyond the destination port.
Tracking is difficult.
Difficult, but not impossible.
So we started looking around for some kind of GPS tracking device that could locate a bale of this plastic at its final destination.
And they finally found one that matched their needs.
So we really needed something that had satellite GPS location as well as an international cellular plan so that it could locate itself and then send out a signal that could be picked up and put on a map.
So yeah, we won't get too technical, but basically there are two ways you can locate a tracking device: using GPS, the satellite, or using cell phone towers, which the devices connect to when they are in reach, and the exact position is triangulated. It's important for the rest of the story.
We were inspired in part by the work of Basel Action Network, who had recently done a very extensive tracking program with electronic waste. Turns out they found a lot of U.S. electronics recyclers were actually exporting into some pretty bad situations in Asia, which they claimed they weren't doing. And so that was inspiring to us, and we looked at a number of devices. They actually worked with MIT to build their own platform, but we found a private provider out of the San Francisco Bay Area called Tracking the World, and it's just a small company that has developed a GPS tracking device. If you remember what a pager looks like, it looks like that. It's a small black plastic box about 2 inches by 3 inches by an inch. Inside it has a SIM card and a GPS tracking technology. And then we worked with them to get it so that it would only ping, send out a signal when it moved and or once a day.
That's important. It sends a signal only when it moves and or once a day.
Okay, so you can stay tuned to what's going on.
And that way you could really conserve the battery, because we knew we needed at least a couple months of battery life for it to get through the ports and end up at its final destination.
Yes, I asked how much they cost.
They run about $250 with a 3-month plan. And we thought, let's just try out a few of these. We got some individual donations from our members to support the work. And
Wait, $250 with a 3-month plan?
Yeah, for the communications, like a SIM card. That's pretty affordable, no?
Yeah, I was expecting a bigger investment.
The thing is, you probably need a few of them because it takes some trial and error.
We tried a few different approaches. We discovered that, getting them through the processing facility basically destroyed them. So we had to attach them to the bales after they'd been processed and baled. We couldn't sort of throw it in a recycling bin and expect it to end up in a bale and still be alive.
Those are good learning lessons for our listeners who I'm sure are going to try this at home.
Disclaimer message?
Yeah, please try this at home.
Or at your recycling facility.
Here's how exactly.
All you need is a plastic bale.
Basically, the bales are pretty dense. So, the plastics are crushed really tightly together, and then they got baling around them. These are big, blocks of compressed plastic. They're about 4 or 5 feet long by 3 feet wide and 4 feet high, something like that. So we actually had to wedge them into the side of the bale, and I thought initially we might need some kind of adhesive to hold them in there, but just the pressure of the bale, if you can get it wedged in there, they're not coming out. We also wanted them, near the surface of the bale so that they could get a better GPS or cellular signal. And some of the limitations with the technology is that to get a satellite GPS location, which is really accurate, the device needs to see the sky.
It's a bit like your children. They need to see the sky sometimes.
Yes, it's a bit like children. If they don't see the sky, they start to triangulate.
It can't be under a roof or inside one of those shipping containers. So they're not very accurate unless they're seeing the sky directly. And if they don't see the sky, if they can't see the satellite, then they start trying to figure out where they are by triangulating off of cellular towers. So if there are cellular towers nearby and they can get a cell signal, they get a pretty close reading in terms of their location, but they could be as far as a couple hundred yards off when they're triangulating off of cell towers. And if the cell towers are further away, it gets less and less accurate. But once they're in a sea container, they lose the satellite, and so then we're sort of locating off of cell towers, and then it gets a little less accurate.
I feel like in a spy movie.
Yeah, that's exactly what I told him.
Yeah, it was pretty, it felt pretty stealthy, like, okay, we're actually going to see where these things go. And more than feeling like a spy, there was just like a real curiosity to where is this actually going to end up in the world? Because we just see it for that minute between the recycling bin and when we send it to the brokerage firm, and then it's out the Port of Oakland and we don't see it anymore. So, to be able to see sort of a longer life of where this stuff actually goes was pretty exciting. I know that sounds a little nerdy, but...
How exciting is your morning coffee now, right? You have this tracking device somewhere out in the world. You're opening the computer to see where it is today.
Oh, I want one.
At first, I didn't want to share it too widely, so it was just me and a couple people. We had a link from the provider that took us to a map, like a Google-style map on the desktop, and I could see it sitting there in our recycling yard, and it would ping once a day, we'd get a little signal, and I could, download a table, and it would show me the GPS locations and the times that it located, and for about a week, I'm just sitting there watching it sit in our yard. And then newest shipment was going out, and suddenly it starts pinging in a storage yard near the Port of Oakland, getting ready to get on a ship. And it's sitting there for a good week or 2 weeks, and I'm checking every day when I have a little break. I take a look and see. And then one day it's just gone. And I'm like, okay, that either means that it's broken and it's no longer working. And we had a number of them that failed for a number of different reasons, but maybe it just stopped working, maybe the battery went dead, maybe it got moved around and crushed, or it's on a sea container out in the middle, on a ship out in the middle of the Pacific. And I just didn't know. So I keep checking every day and nothing new. We didn't even know where it was going. We suspected it would be going back through Hong Kong and into China. But it could have gone to India for all we knew. We had no idea. And frankly, I didn't know how long it took a ship to go across the Pacific Ocean, or if it made multiple stops, or if it would, stop in, who knows, Honolulu and get put on a different ship and then go something. We just didn't have any idea.
So at this point, Martin doesn't know if the tracker is dead, broken, without battery, or somewhere out in the ocean where the satellite or cell towers cannot get the signal. But suddenly,
one day...
But suddenly, I think it's time to close this episode.
No!
Don't worry, we'll find out shortly.
This is mean.
This is fun. And remember, we said we would try to keep our episodes short.
Okay.
If you have any questions, if you need tips for your own GPS tracking experiment, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
hello@greenexchange.earth.
We answer all questions, we answer all emails. We'll be back very soon with more green knowledge, inspiration, and GPS tracking. Keep up the good work in the meantime.